Hello, welcome to The Ploy. I'm Mike Beckham. This is our first episode for 2014, and it's already past halfway through the year, so good on us for being really on the ball there. Our last show last year was the last of this of the way we used to do the show, basically, where we would just be two or three of us and we'll chat about stuff. That's done. We've decided to move on from that and do different things. I will be doing a show every episode, and I'll be interviewing our guests that we'll have on the show, and also doing an introduction. Paul will join me from time to time when he has a time for the intro, where we can catch up and talk about stuff like old times. But for this episode, at least, it's me, myself, and I. On this week's show, we actually have a very exciting guest, Sam Mack, who's a regular on The Project on Channel 10. He's also one of the hosts on the B-League on Fox Sports, and a radio regular. We had a good chat. We talked about, he started off doing a community television show called Sam Mack's Single Bed. We spoke a bit about that. We spoke a bit about what he's doing now with the project and his past radio stuff. We had a good chat about Conan too, because we're mutual fans of Conan, and what he would do if he had the opportunity to do a TV show on network television with fairly unlimited funds, to just see what his ideal show is. That's quite interesting, because I absolutely agree with his answer, by the way. Anyway, let's talk about what's happening with the show for the last year. So basically, we did our last show last year. It wasn't meant to be our last show, but it just happened to be. We recorded a Halloween special that we recorded just before Paul went to Australia to visit, to do some work in Australia from LA. And that show was on a USB stick that has disappeared. So that is our lost episode, the Halloween show that will never be heard again. So that was supposed to be our next show, and it wasn't, and then Paul was in Australia for a bunch of months, and then it was Christmas. So and then we just didn't, Paul didn't really want to do it. I was sort of tired of we were doing the same basic show that we started in 2006, which is a long time. Especially in podcasting, so we just thought, let's stop for a while and see what happens. And then I just had withdrawal symptoms from doing it, and Paul was like, I don't want to commit to doing a show all the time, and so basically this is the arrangement it came to be. And I really do enjoy interviewing people and getting to know people, and especially if they're interesting and funny or have a good story. That's what we'll be doing in the future. Hopefully we'll release one every month, every 2 weeks, depending. We'll just see how we go. But as I said, on this episode, Sam Mack, we've got some guests tentatively lined up in the future, so I won't announce anything yet, but there are some fairly big names and some not so big, but all of them are interesting, all of them I'm really looking forward to chatting to. So in the meantime, our iTunes subscription should be sorted out soon, so you'll be able to subscribe back on iTunes, because that disappeared in the meantime. I don't know what happened to that. Our feed is available to subscribe on our website. And what else? Oh, our Facebook page back up and running at Facebook. I think it's /Deploy Show. Just go to deploy.com.au for the links, and twitter.com/Deploy. Follow us on Twitter. And with thanks to Alight for hosting our show. Let's go with the interview. Here is Sam Mack. I want to talk about something that I believe we have a mutual love for, is Conan O'Brien.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I know through your appearances on The Project especially, usually, if not always, wearing a Conan t-shirt.
Yeah, I have quite the wardrobe of Conan merchandise.
So where did you begin to sort of latch on to him as, I guess, a comedy person you admire?
So when I was in Adelaide, I grew up in Adelaide, but I bought a little place in Adelaide, and one of the first things I did when I moved in there was to get Foxtel, and that's when I got the Comedy Channel, and that's when I was kind of introduced to, they were showing bits of Conan O'Brien back then, and I used to, this is in the days of VHS, it was that long ago, I used to record every episode, and I would only keep, so I made this archive, I would only keep the opening monologue, and then they would normally have a sketch. So I wouldn't really keep the interviews and those bits and pieces. So I've still got them at my parents' place stored. I've got about, I think, 25 VHS, 3-hour VHS tapes that are just full of Conan monologues / sketches that, you know, I just really loved that style of comedy that they were doing. And their Triumph the Insult comic dog was one of their characters that I just, you know, really loved. So, yeah, and I've been lucky enough to go to a taping of the show when it was in New York at Rockefeller, which was, you know, a really cool life experience. And I managed to work up a little bit of a contact with a guy named Aaron Blayett, who was their sort of web guy, but also, you know, quite heavily involved in the show. So I met him, and he was nice enough to give me an actual cue card from that day's show that Conan had been reading jokes off, which was pretty amazing. So, yeah, I've been a diehard Conan fan since, well, probably about almost 10 years now.
Okay, yeah, mine was similar. Got Foxtel, finally realised who Conan was, and then that was history from then. Yeah,
and then obviously, you know, as you become more of a fan of someone, you realise the other things they've done. And he was a writer for The Simpsons, and he wrote the monorail episode that was you know, heavily written by him, which is one of the best episodes in my opinion. And yeah, he's just I don't know, it's just that abstract sort of humour that just connects with me. He's really self-deprecating. I love the characters. I love, you know, just how they would still surprise you, even if you've been watching that show for a long time. They'd still do something or introduce a character that would surprise you and keep it interesting. So yeah, I'm a huge Conan fan.
So when you do comedy pieces, do you take any inspiration from that sort of absurdist comedy, or is yours slightly different? How do you go about it?
I think I am definitely inspired by it. I think one of the things that I love about that show is they're not afraid of, you know, so they did this character, they did this thing called Frankenstein wastes 2 minutes of your time. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah. I've seen Frankenstein, definitely.
It would be Frankenstein not really speaking, just kind of grunting and sort of gesturing for them to follow him. And he would like go on this walk, you know, through the depths of the studio and through the green room. And I just love that they, you know, a lot of TV shows are scared of, you can't have the boom in shot. You can't have, you know, that backstage isn't set up to be on air. Like, whereas Conan and you know, particularly that character, they would just, whatever, like, and as a viewer and as a fan, I love seeing that. I love seeing what it looks like, you know, behind the studio. I think I'm inspired in the sense that, you know, everything doesn't have to be slick. It has to be interesting. I think with TV, and certainly that I like to do with TV, is if you can make it look different or interesting, automatically you've got an advantage, because people are going to they're going to pay more attention. But if it just looks the same, if everything, you know, it's a beautiful set, it's all simple, the background's normal, then, you know, you really have to battle with what you're saying to get their attention. But if you can, even a simple little thing, just, you know, get the camera to pan to something that they wouldn't normally see or they wouldn't expect to see, automatically you've got a bit of a buy-in. So, yeah, I'm definitely inspired in that sense to mix things up and not be afraid to, you know, have things look a bit different.
Yeah, one of my favourites is Joel Goddard on the old late night show. His absurdist sort of, you know, has the young Asian boy next to him and all those sort of things. And I got to interview him a few years ago on his show, and he missed doing the show a lot, and because he was still in New York. I think he's moved back to LA now. But whenever they've sort of moved shows, they've tried to change things. Do you think that over time that's helped or hindered it? And is that the same for you as well? You've been going for about 10 years now or so. Do you you obviously change things up with what you do, but do you change the way that you do things when you're on air?
Yeah, I think you learn from doing it, and that's the best bit of advice I give to people who, you know, I've got a lot of people who just contact me on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, or you run into, and they're like, you know, sometimes just out of high school or whatever, and they're like, I want to do the sort of stuff that you're doing, and I would always say, you know, the best way to learn something is to do it, and that's why I started doing community radio. Then I did community TV, and that's where you make horrendous mistakes. And I look back at some of it, and I'm embarrassed, and I don't really feel embarrassed very often. But I look at these segments, and I just think, what were we thinking? But it's through doing that you actually learn, okay, I don't want to do that again. That didn't work. And I think you're constantly doing that because, no one is at a level where they're perfect. Arguably Ricky Gervais at times, but you just have to keep plugging away, and that's how you learn.
I think when I first ever saw you on anything, because I'm from Melbourne, I didn't see you here on the radio. I saw you on Single Bed on Channel 31 about, was that 10 or 8 years ago, something like that?
Almost. Yeah, I'd say about 8 or 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that, and I'm like, what is this Single Bed show? So I look at it as literally you sitting on a single bed in a bedroom.
Yeah. It sounds like a pretty riveting show, doesn't it?
But so where did that sort of idea come from? As to, you did different pieces on it. It wasn't just you sitting at the bed for half an hour. But so where did you get sort of the idea to, I think the best place for me to host the show is on my bed?
Well, it was just a case of we didn't have studio access, so we knew we couldn't do it in a studio. We didn't want the whole thing to be out and about, and we just thought, all right, well, what's an area that we can definitely get? And the fact that I genuinely, at the age of 22 or whatever it was, 23, was still sleeping in a single bed because I had bought this tiny apartment in North Adelaide, and everything had to be small, like including the furniture, like really tiny chairs, tiny bed. It was like. Yep. It was like a mouse house, or like a Hobbit, it was like the set of the Hobbit, is what it was. So I genuinely slept in a single bed, and my mates found that very amusing, and it became a bit of a running joke. They're like, oh yeah, you're definitely going to find a nice lady, take her back to the single bed. So it became a bit of a running joke, and I, I was cool with that. I found it pretty funny as well. So I thought, well, why don't I do it for the single bed? And at the time I had a mate of mine, Higo, who's doing radio at Triple M, and we were doing radio at the time together. He's a big guy, and I just thought it would look funny, the idea of, two grown men sitting on a single bed hosting a TV show. And then I was lucky enough to have a house band in my kitchen.
Oh, wow. I didn't remember that bit.
Yeah, so that was mainly in the second series we did that. The first series we didn't. And it was the house band were some Adelaide comedians, great musicians. At the time, they were called the Dairy Brothers, and they're now the Beards, and they're a brilliant band, and they're doing huge things. So I claim that I gave them their start with
the network premiere
show. Yeah, that's right.
So after that, or during that time, you've been doing a lot of radio. I think the first time I would have heard you on radio was a Wil Lehmo Drive show. It was a national show.
Yeah.
So you started off. I read on your bio that you won an SAFM competition to be an on-air contest.
Yeah.
So was that sort of? Did you obviously wanted to do radio? I'm presuming. Did you think that would actually lead to anything?
So I was already doing a little bit of radio while I was at uni. I was studying psychology, and to be honest, I wasn't really that interested in it, and I couldn't see myself being a psychologist. So on the side, I was doing a bit of basically volunteering and doing sort of overnight shifts at Triple M, sort of mid-dawn, just, throwing to songs I had no idea about, pretending to be an authority on, these old bands. But so I did that for a while, and then that competition came up, and it was called Who Wants to Be a Co-Host on Air, which was a very clever wordplay on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire,
yes.
Which was a big show at the time. And they had 10 people. You go on air for one day, and then the listeners vote and decide who their winner is, who their favourite is. And I went on and I played guitar, so I did a couple of parody songs. I wrote a few jokes. I prepared for it because I was starting to learn a bit about how it all works. And you've got to go in there with something to say. And it went quite well. And the other great thing for me at that time is when they did the voting, I happened to be working part-time, just to sort of pay my way through uni at a call centre. So the guys at the call centre put up this big whiteboard and said, when you're not on calls today, and so he could win the trip to Edinburgh for the comedy festival. So basically I rigged the competition.
You rigged it.
With a call centre. I cheated my way into the industry.
So that's the advice you give to young people, is try to find any way to cheat your way into the industry.
Absolutely. Always cheat, lie, everything that your parents told you not to do it, because that's how you survive in this ruthless industry. So the prize was to go to Edinburgh in Scotland for the Fringe Festival, the comedy festival,
yep.
Which was incredible. I did that, and when I returned, they were kind of happy with some of the bits and pieces I did, and they offered me some late night work on SAFM, and I did that for a few years, and then sort of progressed to daytime and eventually breakfast, and then decided that I wanted to move interstate, to Sydney, and moved to Sydney.
So when you look back at sort of when you're doing radio, what was the most fun? Was it for Wil Lehmo? Was it doing breakfast in Perth or anything in Adelaide?
I would say, look, it's tough to separate. Wil and Lehmo was probably the year that I learnt the most, and particularly about comedy. Working with those guys was really a really great opportunity. And, Wil in particular, I didn't really know. I knew Lehmo quite well. We were kind of mates, but Wil I didn't really know until that year. And, a guy like him who's unquestionably one of our top 5 comedians, I couldn't name many that are bigger than him and that consistently have great shows and sell-out shows in big venues. I mean, he's a proven commodity in comedy. So yeah, to learn from him every day and to sort of write sketches with him. We wrote a series together based on Underbelly, which was a big TV show at the time called Black Thunderbelly, which is honestly to this day, one of the things I'm most proud of, and we still have a lot of people who remember it and quote it. And I don't think the content directors were big fans of it, but we, probably because a lot of the characters were based on them, and we used to sit in meetings sometimes and get air checked and use direct quotes that they'd said, and then they'd hear it on the air in a sketch the next week.
Well, anything that uses icy cold can of Coke is my favourite thing in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that year was incredible, and I'm still good mates with both of those guys, and I love their work. And Perth was great for me, just because that was immediately after the Triple M thing. I did breakfast in Perth at 92.9. Mm-hmm. That was just great for me on a personal level to kind of get my stuff out there, to actually have some ownership. And with Wil and Lehmo, I was on the air, but it was only little bits here and there, and I had a few segments and whatever. But when I went to Perth, it was every day you need to come to the table with lots of ideas, and you write your own sketches, and you really, that's where you develop your skills. And I guess being in Perth, it's a little bit off Broadway, so that was probably good for me to go over there and to do that and to develop. And now I'm back, and I'm glad I did it. I did 3 years in Perth, and I learned a lot and made mistakes, and it's the same old thing. You got to. A lot of people, I think, are really talented, or they're really interested in it, but they don't do it. They don't back themselves in. Like, I've got a lot of mates who are hilarious and could really do amazing things, but I don't know whether it's a drive thing or whether it's a fear of failure, but yeah, a lot of them just won't actually do it, and that's my big bit of advice. Like, if you screw it up, don't worry, make the next one better. I really believe that, and that's something that I'm, trying to make sure that I'm doing a lot, like making little YouTube videos, get an idea out there. Don't worry that you don't have an amazing crew and lighting and blah, blah, blah. It's more about the idea. Yeah.
And if it's good enough, somebody will notice it eventually.
Yeah, but it's also, it might sound a little bit selfish, but it's also for you. It's how you get better. By doing it is how you get better. And you look at it and you're like, all right, well, I didn't do that right, so the next time I'm going to change it and do this,
Have you found yourself going through that before? Like, have you done, videos? I know you mentioned about the single bed, but later on, have you done videos like, that didn't quite work, and then you had to come back for next time and sort of say, well, let's do it this way, or any of that? Are you constantly sort of refining it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're constantly developing like that. And I think one of the key things is not being ruthless enough with your editing. Like, I made some videos and I watch them now and I just think, too slow. People don't have that sort of attention span. You judge it by your own viewing habits. When you see a video in your timeline on Facebook or on Twitter, if it doesn't grab you in the first 10, 15 seconds, you're out of there, because we're spoiled for choices. There's so many things out there and so many great creative people making, lots and lots of videos and podcasts. Look how many great podcasts there are. I'm very optimistic. I'm registered to download all of these podcasts. I'm never going to hear them. Honestly, I look through my iTunes and it'd be something like 782 hours of podcasts that I haven't listened to, yet I can't delete them because I think, oh, no, I'll get around to listening to that. I'll definitely get around to listening to that one day. And the new one comes through that day. That's one of the main things that I've noticed looking back at some of my videos is just I wasn't ruthless enough with the editing, and that's something that I think, radio is really good grounding for editing, because particularly when I started in radio and I was just doing sort of solo shifts, you only have like 30 seconds to speak, and you want to have a caller in there, so you've got to just get to the good stuff immediately. The thing that I do on Fox Sports with Jules Schiller, we do a thing called the B League, which is a little comedy soccer segment based on the A League, and that only goes for sort of 6 minutes. So you know, we try to treat it as a mini show. We like to, you know, throw to the links, have little sketches, you know, maybe have a guest or something. So it improves your skills at just really chopping things right down and being aware of the fact that, you know, people are time poor, and if you don't grab them straight away, then, you know, you're struggling.
When talking about your TV experience, what was your first appearance on TV? It wasn't The Project, was it?
No, my first. Well, I don't know if you count C31 Adelaide as TV, you know, as in that sense. I'm not having dig at C31; they're great. I mean, as in, do you mean commercial TV?
Yeah, like more like national platform.
Yeah, it was actually. So when I finished the Single Beds show, I had a reel of that I sent to a few people, and I got great feedback. Actually, Channel 10 a couple of guys there were really helpful and gave me some really good feedback, and, you know, liked it. And one of them passed on my sort of reel to a show called The Big Night In, which was only on for, I think, a year or two, with John Foreman, who used to be the musical guy on Australian Idol.
Yeah.
So he hosted it. It was like a late night, almost like a, you know, late night with Jules Holland.
Yeah.
Jules.
I remember this show purely because it had, trying to remember who it was, but I remember its final episode quite historically as well. But yes.
Yeah, it was Matthew Newton.
Yes. Had a bit of
playing piano with his penis or something to that effect. I wasn't on that episode.
No, sadly, you missed out.
A lot of people will be Googling now to see that. That sounds amazing. What a show.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't there for that one. But, yeah, so that was, you know, I did some fun stuff on that. I went, you know, did little segments out of the ARIA Awards, but I also had to do some kind of, I guess you'd call them advertorials, which I didn't really love. But that's fine. That's that stuff. I do want to do more of this stuff. And then I use that to kind of, you know, get a little show reel together and build up some contacts. And really, the project was the big opportunity while I was in Perth to start just doing the whip around, which is, you know, as you would know, very, very short. And normally they were short for time, and they'd sort of, you know, say, sorry, no time for Perth, and I'd just be standing there waving, but you still get paid. So
was it always Perth that got knocked off?
Not always. Eventually they started to move me up in the roster, which was nice. So I'd be after Brisbane, you know, and I'd get maybe 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But I love working with the project. I love that show. They're great people, and I love the whip around. And the whip around is a really popular segment. You know, people love seeing their own city on TV.
Yeah.
So I treated those crosses as, you know, an opportunity to really get away, even if it's just two little jokes, and the info. But I put a lot of work into them, and I really took pride in, you know, doing as great a job as possible as I could in that 30 seconds. So I would spend, I'm not kidding, I would spend 3-4 hours preparing or thinking, writing, working out how can I best do this. I would get there 2 or 3 hours before the cross, which, you know, when you think about it now, like, it was a 30-second cross, and not many people do that. But it's because I cared. You know, I really wanted to do a great job with it, and it paid off because they were happy with it, and they started to give me some more opportunities. They started to, you know, send me to the WACA for the test match, and, you know, just start to do a bit more with them. And then when I decided, you know, that I was finishing up in radio in Perth and was moving back to Sydney, I didn't really have a job teed up, but, you know, the project said, you know, we'll use you. And then the way that it worked out, within a few weeks of getting back, they put me on a contract, and, you know, it just worked out. But it's a good lesson in there to, even if you think, oh, it's such a short bit, or I'm only doing a tiny little thing, you know, own it and put work into it to make it stand out, and that's how you really progress, I think.
And I think you definitely notice, I've seen, you know, a lot of those segments before, and you can definitely notice those who have put in a lot of effort, or those who have sort of just relied on the fact that maybe something spontaneous would happen in that sort of 30 seconds. And it's definitely, if you go between them, you could definitely see the ones, you know, sometimes they're just, you know, a really funny comedian and they can make it work, but oftentimes there's people there who aren't usually comedians, and then you can see they've put a bit of effort into it and made it work.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't have to be funny, you know, it can just be interesting, or it can be, you know, really, you know, a nice moment with a guest that, you know, you've got to do a quick chat with. Like, and it's got to be what the person is comfortable with, because they don't just get comedians to do it, you know, they have just radio presenters, or, you know, just people who've done a bit of TV presenting in the past. It's really about, you know, what they're comfortable doing.
So I wanted to ask you this question. If you because I think you'd probably have a good idea. If you were given just free rein to do your own show on network television, what would it be? Would it be a sort of, would you want to do a Conan-style show, or would it be something totally different if you just had, just TV in 2014, so maybe not unlimited money, but if you had a certain amount of money, what would your ideal show to do be?
Celebrity Splash.
Yeah, so
no,
verse 2.
I'm joking. It would be a Tonight Show. I've always been a big fan of Tonight shows, and I still watch a lot of them these days. Like Craig Ferguson is doing some really cool stuff, and like with the YouTube battles that go on these days, and everyone's sort of vying for attention. Jimmy Fallon and guys like that. It's Jimmy Kimmel. Like it's just a great space. I just love that idea of you can get away with a bit more because it's at night. You can do a bit of sketch, you can have a cool band on, you can have a great guest, you can do stuff with the audience. It's just, I don't know, you've got so many avenues, you can build characters into it. It's almost like it's a dream because you can do so much with that space. And look, in Australia, it's obviously a lot tougher because we don't have the amount of people, in terms of population, Australia versus US, we don't have the amount of people, we don't have as many big name guests. In the US, and if you're doing a show in LA or New York, you've got like literally superstars. You've got Samuel L. Jackson. You've got these sorts of guys who, are going to be promoting a movie every few months. So you've got that flow of guests coming through, which we don't have in Australia. So I understand the battles, but at the same time, I think it's really disappointing that there isn't anything like that. I guess since Rove, probably, there isn't even like a once a week thing like that at the moment, which I think is crazy, particularly with these new channels popping up, what have you got, like, Go, Channel 7, Mate, these types of things. And they don't have to cost a lot of money, in my opinion. You can, in fact, I would love to do a show that embraces how little a budget it has and addresses how little a budget it has, and maybe even talk to the audience about, well, our budget for this week is $400. Here's the spreadsheet of where we spent it, and then ask the audience, that $150 that we spent on the cow suit, was it worth it?
Exactly. That's a good idea.
You know what I mean? Like, I love that. And I think, you could do a great show and like get a bit dangerous with it. Like, to get noticed these days when you're battling with YouTube, the amount of stuff that anyone can upload, you've got to take a few risks and just do some stuff that's a bit out of the box and don't treat it as a cliche old school Tonight Show. Actually, muck around. I would love to work on something like that.
I think the thing that puzzles me is why they don't do it is live TV is what rates now. The big reality tent poles, The Voice, all those sort of things. People want live stuff. And Rove was successful for 10 years, well 9 years, I guess, if you don't count the Channel 9 one. But that was a tremendous show, and it obviously changed over time. But it was live. It had celebrity guests. It didn't have the biggest ones all the time if they weren't in the country, but they still showcased local comedians, that sort of stuff, music especially. And then he went off to LA and did a show, which was good, but that had huge celebrities, but I don't think it was as good as the show in Australia. So I think sometimes they think, we can't get big celebrities, let's not do it. I think that's not really what people are watching for.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, those reasons I gave before, I guess, are they're the standard arguments that you hear against it, particularly from, I guess, people in the business. So, that doesn't mean that I think that they're right at all. So I agree with your point there. And Rose hasn't been on the air doing that show for, what would it be now, like 5 or 6 years, wouldn't it be?
Yeah,
possibly.
2009, I think.
Okay, so 5 years. So, but you chat to people about Rove and they remember moments, they, turn your lights on, flick the switch. Remember they did that thing where they got everyone in a city to turn their lights on and that, say hi to your mum for me. Like, people remember that stuff that they used to do. And that just tells me that people loved it, it rated strong. People still talk about it. They remember moments from it. It gave a lot of great talent their first sort of start. So why don't we have a newer version, a couple of versions of that? That's something I'd love to work on. I think the other part of the argument is a lot of those people are now literally just doing stuff for the net, like they're sort of thinking, how can we monetize the online side of it? But, a lot of people still watch TV, they still have to look at the ratings and, there's a lot of people, I guess we're kind of minorities, people who download a lot of podcasts and, you know, watch all the latest clips from the US. And,
Yep.
but, you know, let's think about the real heartland, the people out in the burbs. And there's a lot of people that just, you know, don't really overthink it. They just whack on the TV. What do we got? Flick around. And that's why if you have something live, I think there's going to be, you know, people would go for it. So hopefully something happens over the next year or so and we see a bit more of that kind of thing.
And just finally, you mentioned this in your email to me before, is you're doing some stuff with the Commonwealth Games coverage for Channel 10?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you be doing for that?
So I went to Scotland about 3 or 4 weeks ago and shot about 10 segments around Scotland. So, you know, we met this guy who lives next to the Loch Ness. You know, he moved there. He lived in a little caravan. He moved there 22 years ago. He left his girlfriend, and he said he's going there to find the Loch Ness Monster. So, which was brilliant. And then I said, so in that time, like, what have you seen? You know, what's the most conclusive piece of evidence you've seen about the monster? And he goes, one day I saw the waves, you know, there was a real trickle in the waves. There was this white line. And I said, have you got a photo of it? And he goes, no, I'd left my camera inside that day. That's the best he'd seen in 20-something years.
Yeah.
So just little segments like that, they will play out. We just finished editing them, so I scripted them. I wrote the scripts. I just voiced them the other day. They're ready to go. They're kind of polished and ready to go. But when I'm over there, I leave next Friday, I will be doing a lot of live stuff. So I believe it's Thorpe and Mel McLaughlin will be involved in the coverage as well, and they'll kind of cross to me, and I'll be out at the table tennis and the judo. I'll be championing a lot of this sort of underdog sport. So yeah, it's going to be good fun doing more of the lighter side of the games as opposed to, you know, serious sports reporting. There'll be a bit of, you know, sports stuff as well, but I'll be doing a lot of the kind of fun around the Commonwealth Games.
So you definitely have an interest in sports with your other show. Is that something that will continue? You still want to continue doing sports?
Yeah, absolutely. I love my sport, and I think that as a sports fan, you don't just want to have serious analysis. So, like, there's so much comedy in sport, and there's so many personalities in sport. So, you know, that's a big part of what Jules and I do with the B League, where we try to show the humour involved in the sport, and that's been pretty well received. So, yeah, I'm really keen to do a lot more, you know, a lot more fun around sport. So, yeah, I definitely will continue with that. Do you have like a catchphrase that you sign off with?
No. I used to just say bye for now. That's not a catchphrase though.
What about Beckham out?
Beckham out?
No.
Like no. I was when I interviewed Rove in 2009, and he did yell Mr. Beckham. So maybe I should just yell Mr. Beckham at the end of every show.
Yeah, maybe you end every show with getting the guests to say it.
Well, yeah. What's it? Pete Holmes shows Keep It Crispy. I'm not sure. What I don't.
Hang
yeah.
on, hang on 1 second. Hang on, I've just got my guitar. Hang on. Here we go. All right.
There you go. I'll do a remix with that and Rove, and it will set the iTunes charts on fire.
Yeah, get Pitbull involved. I think it's the law musically. Pitbull has a feature on all hit singles. So if you could do that, Mr. Worldwide,